everybody. Welcome. I know there's a great buzz of eating here and meat being cut, etc. My name is Aisling McReynolds. I'm the Chief Business Officer at Synack, and I would like to welcome all of you here today, and I hope you're having a wonderful RSA conference. So, woohoo! So, on behalf of Jay and Mark, our founders, and the whole executive team, we're thrilled that you could join us. We have an exciting panel set up today. It's full of big personalities who have lots of great opinions. And so, usually in the last number of years, we've talked about first, what is crowdsourcing and what is crowdsourced testing? And I think we've moved way on from there. And then we talked about why we are the most trusted crowdsourced security testing platform. And I think we've moved on from there. And so today the topic, as you all saw and registered for, is all of these people are actually now in a very practical stage of using. And so the goal is that this group of CISOs can talk to all of you about their experiences, what they're doing to just scale security inside their organizations and to live that security lifestyle. And that's the goal, that we hear from them how they're doing that so that each one of you can look at how you can do that or replicate that in your own organizations. So I'm going to hand over to Jack from Trace3. He's one of our really great partners, and so Jack has huge experience when it comes to working with all of these CISOs, but also in remediation and when you find something, what you can do about it. So I think he's going to be a wonderful, wonderful moderator for the event. Thanks, Jack.
Thank you so much. So Jack Britton, Trace3, Principal Security Consultant. Just briefly, okay, so just briefly, how did I meet Synack, right? So I used to be a pen tester. I used to work for a CISO, and we had a CISO come up to me and say, hey, we need you in a box times 1,000. Eventually we found Synack. We were able to scale at the speed of delivery of our critical services. So that was my kind of story with Synack. It goes beyond that, but we're going to move on to the CISO. So we've got Mike Newborn, Navy Federal Credit Union, CISO.
Hi, everyone.
We've got Mark Walmsley. Apologize, Mark. So CISO at Freshfields, Brookhouse, Derringer. Did I say that right?
Yeah, no problem, yeah.
And then we've also got Jason Lukowitz, CISO at Accenture. Gregg McCord, Global Head of Information Security at the CalAmp. And Kevin Kerr, who's the CISO at Oak Ridge National Laboratory. So Mark, Mike, sorry, not on the paper. I'd like to start with you, please. Can you give us just a brief introduction of who you are and what you do for Navy Federal Credit Union?
Sure. So I'm the CISO at Navy Federal. I've been there for, it's actually been only 8 months now. Formerly, this is my 3rd CISO gig. I was at McKinsey for 3 years. I was at Bloomberg for a few years. And I spent most of my career at VeriSign, where I sort of jokingly but sort of seriously say I did all my real work hands-on and most of the cyber domains that we have defined today. So a little bit over 22 years of experience. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Mark?
Okay, so Mark Walmsley, I'm the CISO at Freshfields. I'm a partner there as well, so it's a global law firm. Only 2 offices in the US, but if you're in Europe, we're well known. So I've been at Freshfields for 17 years, former British intelligence, so that was the starting point of my life. A lawyer for 10 years, so don't hate me, you're not getting charged to be here. And then worked in software delivery, and then the last 6 years I've been the CISO. So I cover all of Freshfields' business, both internally, but also advising clients on breaches at the same time.
Thank you. Jason?
Sure. So I'm actually the deputy CISO. I'm not the CISO at Accenture. I've been there for 23 years. I joke that my title is actually chief plumber because, shit happens and you need somebody to route it through the pipes. Someone had asked me when we were doing our introductions, what did you do before? Well, I've been at Accenture for 23 years, and I worked at Subway and Sunglass Hut. So if you want help making sandwiches with your food and looking good, come talk to me after, and I can help you out.
Greg?
Andy's got a great jacket on. It's nice, right? So I work at CalAmp. I've been there for about a year and a half, getting close to 2 years now. CalAmp owns LoJack, which is what we're better known for. We have offices around the world. In my past life, I was in the military, also a contractor in the service as well. And I've also worked at companies like Pacific Life, where I headed their information security program in one of the divisions. So I've been around the world a little bit. We have a global presence. I have to worry about things like CCPA, GDPR, SB 327, which we're in the IoT space. So it's been kind of interesting. And since we got a lawyer in the room, it's even better.
Kevin.
And they saved the best for last. I was a Red Hat hacker for the government. I used to break into government systems, and they got tired of me breaking into them, so they actually hired me as a CISO. Prior to that, I was Air Force Cyber Warfare, retired as a colonel from the Air Force as a Cyber Warfare commander.
Yeah, very cool. Just want to ask you, just kind of going down the line, what's your opinion on the current state of cybersecurity today, and how do you align your business's vision around living that sort of secure lifestyle, right? Leveraging a crowdsourced managed platform like Synack.
So I think the state of security today it's a mess. It's a very one-sided battle we're fighting, and I think it changes depending on what your perspective is. I think getting the business on your side and to adopt good cyber practices that ultimately help manage your cyber risk for an organization, a lot of it is around how you position cyber. Who owns the risk? Are you a checkbox compliance function? Are you a true business partner? What does it mean to be a true business partner? And I think a lot of that is how you position it. When do you want to roll your sleeves up? And a lot of this is really just making the business understand that you're there to make them successful, and at the same time, culturally, you know they need to be thinking about these things. That it's kind of muscle memory you're building, right? It needs to be like, I know I have to breathe. I don't think about it. Well, I know I need to be secure because I want to make sure that our customer data is protected. That we can reduce the high risk activities we're working on. I think there's a lot of things in cyber, and I know we're all here, at Synack and crowdsourced testing maybe on some people's minds. I think it's trying to find innovative ways to do things that historically haven't worked, right? Like the definition of insanity is trying the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. So we're all pen testing. We've hired people to do it. You spend money, and they're not necessarily incentivized to find stuff. They're probably trying, but they're not incentivized. So I think aligning the incentives to drive a certain behavior, I think is really powerful in vulnerability management, and I think that's why crowdsource is a way to go, but also for cultural change in a company.
Anything to add, gentlemen?
Yeah, I'll add something to it from a different angle. So in the legal industry, there's a big push from our client base to be much more innovative in what we're delivering. So not just legal service, but specifically about building tools and making sure that our clients can work more effectively with those tools. And when you start to think about that, you start to look about the risk around it. And so what that means for us as a law firm trying to build technology, it's quite a scary prospect. But when you pen test an application and you give it to a client and then it falls over, because some of them are software companies, they come back and they start to lose faith in your business very quickly. And so this is where we've got to around crowdsource, is that actually we're starting to say that product is safe all the time because we're testing it continuously. And if there is an issue, it's speed to resolution. So who's here has ever engaged corporate lawyers before? Yeah, congratulations. So if you're like that, you phone your lawyer when you're in a crisis and you expect them to pick up the phone and deal with the situation very quickly. Now imagine if you deliver a software platform and you can't fix that problem, and it's for a bank or a car manufacturer, suddenly you start to tarnish your business. So what should have been an opportunity is now a big weakness. So we're now using crowdsourced testing as a way of actually giving our clients reassurance that we are fast and we're responsible.
Yeah, I'll add on. So I'm in complete agreement with everything that's said. I think the other piece too that I would add for it is, in the game of break fix, one of the things that I like here is you can take the data, you can use it as a validation point for all of the investment you've made and is it working, but you can also take the information that you get from the crowdsourced data points and help define the strategy for where you want to spend the money so that you are creating guardrails and you're not seeing the same thing over and over. You're actually moving towards change. And with the crowdsource model, your attack vector changes at each one of the tests that's performed. Whether you have the continuous model, you do some type of quarterly or monthly. It's differentiated, and it gives you a very different lens and telemetry on what you're seeing and to fix it.
So the data that's actually on the platform itself, some would say, hey, that data actually speaks to a broad range of audience. And it's very different from your traditional pen testing firm, where you might get that PDF or maybe the next year. It's not the same sort of data. It doesn't speak to a broad range of audience. Would you say that's probably accurate?
Well, it is, but I would also say it depends on who the audience is that you're giving it to. So we'll get the data in, we'll then analyze it to try to understand where in the business it actually aligns to. I mean, with Accenture, 5,000 people, 4,000 plus clients, we've got multiple mappings. So I want to understand when that data comes in, who's the business owner, and then also who is the technologist responsible for supporting that business owner, and make sure they both understand and are both bought into resolving it. Or if not, that they sign off and accept the risk.
Greg?
Yeah, so actually going back to your question, I was thinking about it a little bit, and risk is ever evolving, right? But at the same time, the attackers don't care. So whatever framework that we're coming up with, they don't care. They don't have a framework. They're just going to try to get in and try to get what they want and get back out, or stay in and be persistent, right? So when I take a look at a platform like Synack within CalAmp, it made more sense to get kind of that perspective. It's like, how are they getting in, right? So when I go to the board and I say, hey, I've got 11,000 vulnerabilities, what does that mean to the board? They're like, I can't consume that information. But if I told them, like, look, well, we have 40, and going back to the points of the rest of the panel here, is like, I can now build a strategy around those 40 exploitable items, the ones that could potentially be liable for the organization, right? So speaking like a lawyer as well, it's like, I've got to be able to convey that information to my board as like, this 11,000 doesn't mean anything, but 40 does. 40 I can take action on. And if I had a platform that would, show me how they did it, I can now fix and reverse engineer that and apply best practice and the guardrails. So to me, it's a no-brainer at that point.
So one thing I like about this, being an old pen tester myself, we used to go in, we'd attack you, we'd find the 5 or 6 holes, and then we'd bail, And that was a great model because life was easy. I only had to find one hole. As a CISO, I've got to fix 10,000 holes that are clicking emails every day. So this is kind of nice in the sense of it's a partnership, and that they're coming in, and not only are they finding stuff, but then they help you analyze, what's going on, and you can go, okay, I see this, and then I can turn around, and because of what they've been finding, we've actually improved our development process. So I can go back to our developers, our IT developers, and say, hey, look at this. This is a continuous problem. They found it on 5 sites. Well, we found it on 5 sites, and then we go, okay, where else is this? Because we all know developers, they cut and paste. I built a website, and they just rename it, right? So the bad, we found vulnerabilities that move from a site that's 10 years old to sites that are 6 months old, because that developer just copied and pasted. Well, they found that, and we found that history, and because of this, we've changed our development process. So it's great in that respect, partnership. The other thing too is I'm able to go back, and like you were saying, I'm able to show management, and I'm spending X dollars for this, and this is, I'm going to be honest with you, it's dirt cheap, relatively speaking. Try to get a developer in-house or someone in-house who's a pen tester. They're going to be very focused on XML or HTML or whatever. These guys, they cover the gamut. There's nothing they can't pen test. There's nothing they can't attack. And I'm getting that for the cost of maybe 5 people, but I'm getting the capabilities of 30, 40 people because of this crowdsourced model. So it's absolutely phenomenal. So I can test my Docker, I can test my whatever container you're using, Kubernetes, whatever. It doesn't matter. They're testing it all, or they're testing my old PLC crap, because like others, we're running XP. I've got NT on our environment. All kinds of fun stuff.
I want to add something.
I'm about to set up another test here, and they're going to hit our supercomputer here pretty soon. Oak Ridge, for those who don't know us, we have the world's fastest supercomputer. Okay, we do calculations in the exaops range, and for those that don't know what an exaop look it up because I don't know either, but I think it's like a billion calculations in a second or a minute or whatever the heck model it is. But I'm going to have them start hacking that because our supercomputer is used across the world by everybody. You can get time on it and do research. You know, you can be from Italy, you can be from Russia, China. You know, you can be from all these countries, and if you're doing open science research, you're on our supercomputer, so I want to make sure that system's good, because I don't want, you know, someone who's doing research from Italy or from Ford, and then someone else is from X, and they're able to see that research. So I want to make sure that supercomputer's, you know, good. So I know Paul and the gang are here, and they're just, I know they're foaming at the bit hearing that. So that's your next job, guys, is our supercomputer.
Do you want to add to that, Mike?
Yeah, I just want to add, well, actually, you asked a question, and now I had a little bit more time to process it than like 4 seconds. You asked a question like, you know, and I more than just vulnerability management, right? And this is something that every day for the 8 months I've been in my current job, and I've asked this many times over my career, like, what are we trying to do in this field? Like, how do we turn the tide? Because this is a really, really tough problem we have. And I think one of the things that I've determined, it really is, and I mentioned this, but I really want to like double down on it. It's about incentives. What are we incentivizing people to do? What behaviors? How many of us have said, we've got a password policy. It requires something that's like 20 to 30 characters. You can't have repeating characters in it. You know, it's got to be this really long thing. I got to change it every 90 days, maybe 60 days. This was built with the idea that, you know, we're trying to incentivize people using a computer not to brute force something. But what happened? Everyone started writing their passwords down on a virtual Post-it note or a real Post-it note. And, you know, and you can't remember a lot of these, so you start using the same thing in many places. And this didn't make us more secure. This made us a lot less secure. And so it's the same concept with crowdsourced pen testing, but on a bigger scale. If we really want to make a difference in managing cyber risk in all of our roles, for those of us that are doing it, you have to look at the behaviors you're incentivizing. If you want developers to find vulnerabilities quicker, then you need to incentivize them. You got to provide a technology, but you also have to incentivize them to want to find them, to fix them. And same with the business. You've got to incentivize the business to pull you into those conversations and make them really see that they cannot be successful without you. So, sorry, I wanted to double down on the incentivize.
No, I appreciate that. Greg.
Yeah, I was going to add as well. I was like, I had to change, at least internally, at least how we thought about information security within the organization. Because we do an annual pen test, right? And I was thinking about it, and that is not as actionable as I could do something that's what I coin, or maybe not coin, is attack simulation. So I was educating the board, and I was like, look, we do this thing every year, and it just eats up resource time, but it's not tied to any processes. So how can I tie it to processes? Well, let's tie it into the CI/CD pipeline. Why not? We've got folks on the Synack side that are speaking the same language as the engineers. Maybe a little different. Maybe it's a different perspective on how they're writing the code.
So we're talking about leveraging like the integrations on the platform?
Correct. So in the platform itself, you get to speak with the researchers. So as you're fixing it, you can actually leverage that to do some additional look-through on what you're fixing, right? And then how you can carry that horizontally. So now you have a template that you can apply to the rest of the chain. So in the organization, I mean, the board loves it because, one, now I'm putting security back down to where the engineers are developing. And so we have that ROI based on the super cheap comment you made. So it's good.
Yeah.
So let's take it back to day zero, right? So traditionally you went with boutique firm, you know, pen tester may go 8 weeks. What was it like? What was the journey for you when you came in and said, hey, we're going to invest in this company and they're going to bring us an average of 60. They got a workforce of 1,500 of the world's elite hackers. How did you get that through legal? Like, how did you get that through, you know, just change in general?
Yeah, okay, so it's tough, and I was talking to Justin, who's the sales guy, about how long it takes to get through that process. And even when you've got lots of lawyers, it still takes months and months, because lawyers generally are skeptical about anything that is away from the norm. But I said this at a finance conference recently, and I said regulation, I think, is going to die off. The ticking of the boxes is going to die off, and it's going to go right back to the old way of doing things, likelihood and impact. So if you start talking like that and you start saying to them, wait a second, what do you want to do? Do you want to stay in the old world and run the old pen test and tick a box to say we've got it and show your client and your insurer? Or do you actually really want to know how secure you are so that you don't have to go to the press, you don't actually have to talk to the regulator, you don't have a breach? When you're starting to get into that mindset of real risk management rather than regulation ticking the boxes, then actually it's a really simple question. Then they start to get into the process of, well, where are they? And if you say, well, they're top hackers in Russia, they start to panic a bit until you say, well, wait a second, we've got a bunch of lawyers in Russia. They're all background checked. Everything goes through the platform. Everything's keystroked. You can watch it as it's happening, and it's very fast to do it, and we see the resolution at the end of it, and that process is a week. So suddenly you get this great process, very transparent, but a short-term risk. It's only a week that that system is open for being tested. Then suddenly the general counsel goes, guess what, Mark? This is great. Why don't you take it to the board and explain to them what it looks like, run that process through, show them what it looks like. Very quickly, it's a mindset change. And then you say, well, guess what? You board members are going to be responsible for cyber risk. It's not me. If something goes wrong, yes, I'm sure I'll get sacked or fired, as you say in the States, but you will be accountable. They'll want to know why you didn't go and do something professionally to the best of your ability at that time, and then ticks again, you go, right, I get it, let's do it. So actually, if you follow that methodology, it's quite simple.
I agree with all that. I think this is very specific to your legal group in a company. I've been in companies where legal is really, really conservative, and you would run into a lot of problems, and you've got to bring in external counsel and get people comfortable. And then I've been in places where legal will take the lead from you and is a really supportive business partner. Fortunately, in my current role at Navy Federal, our legal is very supportive of what needs to be done. I think the only concern that we had was, where are they coming from, right? We don't have lawyers in Russia that are doing work, so that argument's not going to go well. But I think we went with the 5 eyes, trying to find, well, these are coming from, our allies. And so we'll take people there, and you get a smaller group. It's not as effective, but it's still much better than a traditional approach.
Yeah, I would agree. So surprisingly for us, if you've ever contracted with Accenture, it's pretty challenging. I thought with bringing up this idea that our general counsel and our legal would push back heavily, and they actually didn't. They were very bought in. The idea of management of cyber risk has been a huge investment for Accenture. And this differentiated approach that we could tie to a measurable metric was something that they were very bought into. So it actually went through relatively quick, and the first set of findings have been impressive.
But actually you can start to leverage it in your consulting business if you're then selling the service on as part of your consulting. Mm-hmm. And so if you do have a problem getting it through you, and we're about to do this, Freshfields are going to do it in May. If you have a breach, we've got the lawyers who will deal with the regulators for you. But actually there are 7 firms that sit underneath that as a wrap service that will come and support you through that, all technical consultancies. But you don't need to sign up for it. It's the risk that sits with Freshfields. Your contract's with us. We have a contract with those 7 suppliers. So suddenly it's a different mindset, it's a different capability. And I'm sure your board looked at it from that perspective and said, guess what? It's great for us, but maybe we can also resell it longer term.
Potentially.
So getting this sold to the board and everything's pretty easy because you just look at what's going on in the world. I mean, Barr just last week announced 4 Chinese nationals are the cause behind the Equifax hack, And you go to management and go, this is every day. I have 10,000 hits per day or per hour or whatever it is on our border from God knows where, and it's like these guys are doing what I want them to do. They're going to come in, they're going to find the stuff before these 4 Chinese national come in and breach our data system or whatever. So this was a no-brainer for our board and our legal. They're just like, yeah, okay, there were some NDAs and all that kind of fun stuff, the standard mumbo jumbo, but this was a no-brainer. They bought it lock, stock, and barrel. So you can't in today's world. Business is starting to realize cyber and business go hand in hand. Some of my friends that have heard me before, if you do the business impact analysis and you do your confidentiality, integrity, and availability, BIA plus CIA equals CYA, So not that I'm a calculus major or anything, I can't do maths, but somehow that works out, and you just sell it based on that, whether it's the board or legal, and you're golden. And CYA means cover your assets. I didn't say anything bad. So for those that may have been thinking something else.
Greg?
Yeah, so what I did in our organization is I literally sat with legal and we went through the agreement together because there was some new language in there that they may or may not have seen. So I wanted to ensure that, one, we're practicing CYA, we're covering our butts. I'm able to have the same language that I have with legal as well as InfoSec, including new language if it's needed. And then I'm able to present with legal to the board whatever that scenario is, right? Oh, security researcher, what does a security researcher mean? Well, they're thinking like a hacker, for example, right? And there's like, oh, I'm going to get scared about that. It's like, well, we actually put that in the agreement that there's a certain amount of dollars or whatever that is to CYA, so we're actually getting actual intelligence on our own systems. So I think from my perspective, I think it's crucial that we work closely with the legal department because if you're constantly sharing that information, one, they're going to come to you and ask certain questions, and if you go to them for all those specific questions, then it's going to be a closer working relationship.
Thank you. So I've heard from some customers, right? They'd come back and they'd say, hey, we're kind of obligated to do this pen test, and we do it twice a year for whatever the reason might be. But the problem is that oftentimes that document you get sometimes will cause conflict between the security organization and maybe some of the project level organizations. How is the integration of the platform? How do you get buy-in from your different teams at the project level with the Synack platform? How does that change the perspective at that project level?
I can go first if you like. So if you work with software delivery companies, DevOps, the one thing they hate is a delay. So they will commit to sending out a particular product either to market or internally. Anything that you can do to front load and stop a delay is really important. So you don't have to pen test right at the end of a product, you can do it earlier. And those point-in-time pen tests, the traditional ones, aren't actually very good. We always find minor issues, but they're running the same script again and again. The smart developers know how to get past those little pinch points. But actually when you go crowdsourcing and you have the beautiful mind approach to it, and they can break it in lots of different ways and work together, you know that that platform is going to be super secure, which means that when you deliver it, it's delivered on date, and you know that that team can roll off and move on to the next project rather than sitting on it for months and months at a time. And there's nothing worse for a company to miss a deadline or deliver a product that is substandard. So it's just a mindset, and if you say that to your CIO and your DevOps leads, they get the concept that actually this is going to protect our reputation, the product's going to be strong when it goes.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, I would say a lot of it depends on the maturity of an organization as well. So how mature the organization is with encompassing and embracing the findings that come through whatever it is or whoever it is that you hire to come and do the work. I think the differentiator here is it's not just based on your standard, wash, rinse, repeat. Each time it's a bit different, and it's scalable also. So I can take the information, and where we are in 2020, typically when I go and speak to the teams, or I should say when my team goes and speaks to the teams, there isn't a pushback. There's no defense mechanism. Well, it's not, this isn't risk, and because of these things, it's like, no, we've proven we can get all the way through, and there's usually, rarely anything. And then we take those findings, and with our, our IP footprint, and I'll have my hunting guys go out with lessons learned from the attack that was just performed and see where else. So whether it be looking at the specific developer, or whether it be looking at, the ubiquitous of Accenture and going and see what's out there.
Yeah, when we first talked about bringing this in, our developers were not fond of the idea of this pen testing on a continuous basis. And after they found something and we shot the first developer that complained about it, everybody else got on board. But what really happened is that first one that had the problem, we didn't actually shoot him. We made him walk around with a sandwich board instead, saying, I failed. I'm kidding again. But what we did is we actually used that as an example for teaching And we supported it, you know, the CISO, the CIO, and everybody, and you know, we didn't beat them up, and we improved our processes, our development processes. And at the lab, we have a lot of researchers that set up their own websites and do stuff too. And when their stuff started getting pinged, and you know, hey, this is bad, the researchers were like, yeah, I'm a PhD-er in nanotechnology. I don't want to run a Linux website or, you know, whatever. And so they started turning over all that stuff to us. So it's actually been advantageous in the long run. It's diminished our shadow IT somewhat. I mean, I'm never going to get rid of it, unfortunately, at the lab. But it's actually brought it down because 2 or 3 researchers have said, man, I'm tired of getting pinged or my stuff being, you know, wrong, and I don't have time to do this right, so I'm going to turn it back over to ITSD and let them manage it. And again, we've improved our dev processes, you know, DevOps, that sec stuff's still not there, but, you know, it's getting there. But it's definitely, like I said, first they were, but now they're on board with it. And one of our developers came back and said, you know, they attacked us in ways I never even knew you could attack, you know, this SAP or, you know, whatever, success factors or whatever.
So would you say your developers not only are learning from the platform, they're consuming the data in that platform in a way that's convincing them to buy in?
Yeah, because they have to go fix their broken stuff. And then Synack comes back afterwards and goes, okay, nope, it's not fixed. And like, damn. And they have to go do it again and again until Synack comes back and says, you're good. You know, so this one doesn't die, it doesn't go away. And you know, from our standpoint, management, we're not beating up our developers to go, oh, go get that low vulnerability or go get that moderate, you know, type of situation. We're like, yeah, get this stuff that's leaving us exploitable and things like that. So, I mean, you take that, you combine it with other tools, you know, scanning tools and Nessus, Tenable, whatever, you know, you're using, and all these different things. I mean, you start integrating all these various tools, and you actually start getting a synergy among this, and it's actually improving, you know, an environment that, you know, at the lab, our job is to share research and be open, but my job is to protect it. So kind of like an oxymoron, you know, open protection. So this is kind of nice. It helps make my life easier, and I'm losing less hair now because of it. So.
Thank you.
I guess I'll add a couple things. I think it's like 3 things in my head of what you need to do. Sorry. The first one is don't boil the ocean, right? Crawl, walk, run, fly, however you want to say it. I think you need to make sure that you start slowly and ease people into it, right? The second thing is take a risk-based approach, right? If you've got a remotely exploitable critical vulnerability from Synack and your Tenable, Nessus, Rapid7, whatever else you use, find something that's lower priority, lower risk, then prioritize the ones that are going to have the biggest risk buy down. And then the third thing, going back to my incentives theme today, know what you're incentivizing, right? I think you were talking about that. Incentivize the developers to want to do this, make it fun for them, gamify it, make it easy for them, integrate into their tools. Don't try to make them integrate into yours. So I think those 3 things.
Greg?
Yeah, so I kind of heard it from everyone, but it really goes down to your understanding of the culture within your organization, right? And knowing what that culture is from the executive perspective all the way down to the engineers. So the executives are telling me, well, I saw high, mediums, and low last year, and there was, I want to say 11,000 again. So what does this mean this year? And I was like, well, it's 40. So this is how they got in, and this is how it's affected the brand. When I go to the engineers, it's a different story. Now I'm telling them, look, I'm trying to help you here. Yeah, this thing is broke. I want to tie this to more or less all the CI/CD pipeline and the future releases. We don't have to solve it tomorrow. We don't have to boil the ocean. We don't have to solve world hunger on this thing. But let's at least tie it into the process so that we can help you guys out. You guys are going to learn from the process as well. I'm going to use your ticketing system, so because there is an integration with Jira, I can just automatically, the alert comes in, goes to their ticketing system, the engineers see it, and now they've added it to the next release of the platform, which is fantastic.
Very cool. So we've got buy-in, right? We've got executive buy-in. We've now got buy-in at the developer level, right? The project level. And you've done a proof of concept. everyone's like, hey, we love this. How do you start to adopt that continuous sort of model into your environment? And then how do you prevent complacency? Because over time, you've got this cool tool, but eventually everyone moves on to their day job. So what do you have to do differently with this platform to convince your DevOps team not to be complacent?
So I'll start. I'm going to steal what you said. It really is around behavior and incentivization. You can use the carrot or the stick. I'd rather use the carrot because the stick just kind of doesn't work. Most of us are likely using development offshore, and if you go and use the methodology of, we'll fire them, well, they'll just go outside with their resume and get hired across the street. So is it reward? Is it, some kind of wall of like, look what, these guys did and how fantastic it is? But there needs to be incentivization for the behavior. And I think if you can, I forget who was saying like plug into their tools versus them plugging into yours. If you can get speaking the same language, take the learnings from the test where you're then re-educating them on what it is that's being seen and these new techniques, it creates a flywheel effect that creates the right behavior and the right secure platform.
I'm okay with complacency. I welcome it. I don't want anyone to have to think about this. Building on this, the sec in the DevSecOps, this is business process optimization, right? That's what we're talking about here. All these things ideally should not require people to change too much of what they're doing. If you find the vulnerability and you've got a good program and you get it in their pipeline and in their work line, you're good. I don't actually want people to worry about it. And I think what I would do is if you're finding consistently the same vulnerabilities in the same applications or problems in certain areas, you may look at, well, I got to do better training. Like, what can I do preventative to prevent these things from happening? Or am I always using some outdated version of Apache, or am I running PHP? Or maybe there's some design issues we have to do. But to be honest, the words complacency, I generally don't like it, but in this case, I'm okay. It shouldn't be that someone has to worry about it. It should be that it's just baked in.
Yeah, but I think part of it's about egos. So everyone's got an ego to some degree. Developers have definitely got egos. And by them learning how to code better, they're competitive. Who works for developers all the time in the room? Yeah? So developers are really competitive with one another to get the best projects that are coming down the pipeline, to have the smoothest transfer to the product, to the market. If you start to gamify it for them, and actually it's them against the hackers, can you produce a platform that's super secure, that isn't going to get caught out by the world's best hackers, then suddenly you are giving them something back. They are accountable. They do feel like they're in that competition. And we have definitely seen that at Freshfields. We've definitely seen that competition starting. So there's tons of ways to do it. I completely agree with what you both said. But also, it is also about ego. And if you play down to them at that level, it works really, really well.
Yeah, but the other thing too is I'm going to start using this with the convergence of IT and OT. I'm going to start using this in my OT world because cyber people don't really know OT, the majority of them in the world, so at least in my environment. So I'm going to start relying on Synack to bring in OT experts to help me start tackling that environment and finding where our weaknesses are there. And then, because everything is so integrated now, I got to have something that's going to fill a huge hole in our environment.
And there really is no boundary anymore, is there? So we always talk about network perimeters. Well, there isn't one. But actually, going back to your question again, I think it really depends on the maturation of the organization that you're in, right? So saying that we're going to incentivize, which I highly encourage. Or we do, audits, on a quarterly basis, monthly basis, or user access review. It's the whole pipeline of the knowledge that you have as a CISO that will come into the organization and say, hey, well, in this organization, I'm going to do these certain steps to get us to this point of maturation. I want to start a bug bounty program, or I want to start incentivizing internally to ensure that maybe we get to complacency, or we have fun doing our day jobs.
Because Synack shows in their dashboard, they show you everything that they've done and how they got to where they got. Our cyber folks and our developers are seeing this too, and so they're actually learning just through looking at this. And what's nice is if they have questions, we can go back to the Synack team, and they'll set up meetings with the tester or someone, I don't know who, because they're anonymous, you know. It could be Mickey Mouse on the other end, I don't know. But they'll set up meetings with these people, and they'll help train, you know, to an extent, you know, our folks. So this is great. So it's a win-win in this whole thing, and we've had no disadvantages in this whatsoever. So.
Okay. Thanks for your time, gentlemen. CISO panel.